The colony on Kepler 442b was peaceful that morning. Children played in the parks while adults worked in the farms and laboratories. Nobody expected what came next. The sky turned dark as massive ships blocked out the sun. These were not human ships. They belonged to the Vecthari Empire, a race of aliens known for their cruelty and hunger for power. Laser fire rained down from the ships. The colonists tried to run, but there was nowhere to hide. Vecthari soldiers landed in the streets, their weapons ready. They grabbed people from their homes and workplaces. Families were torn apart. Children cried for their parents. Within hours, over 2,000 humans were captured and dragged into the alien ships. The Vecthari commander, Overlord Thexnar, stood on the bridge of his flagship. He watched the humans being loaded into holding cells like cattle. A cruel smile crossed his face. He activated a communication channel that would broadcast across all human colonies. Humans, his voice boomed. Your people are now property of the Vecthari Empire. They will work in our mines on Corvin 9 until their bodies break. This is the price of your weakness. Do not attempt rescue. You will fail. The transmission ended. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The United Earth Council called an emergency meeting. Leaders from every nation gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. The room was filled with anger and fear. Ambassador Park Ji-woo stood at the podium, her face grave. We must negotiate, she said. The Vecthari have superior technology and more ships. A direct military response would be suicide. We need to find a diplomatic solution. But the Vecthari refused all attempts at communication. They ignored every message Earth sent. It became clear that talking would not work. The colonists were gone and time was running out. Defense Minister Lee Tae-yang requested a private meeting with the council leaders. He brought with him a classified file. Inside was information about a man most people had never heard of. His name was Captain Kang Dae-hyun. 5 years ago, Tae-yang explained, Captain Dae-hyun completed an impossible mission. He infiltrated Vecthari space alone. He destroyed their main weapons research facility. Dozens of their elite guards died. The Vecthari still don't know how it happened. They fear him. They call him the Shadow of Death. The council members looked at each other. Some were skeptical. One man against an empire? It sounded like fantasy. But Ambassador Ji-woo had seen the mission reports. She knew what Dae-hyun was capable of. Where is he now? She asked, retired, living alone in the mountains. He wants nothing to do with us anymore. Tae-yang paused. His last mission cost him everything. His entire team died. He barely made it back. The guilt destroyed him. Will he help us? Another council member asked. Tae-yang shook his head. I already sent someone to ask. He refused. He said his fighting days are over. The room fell silent. Without Dae-hyun, they had no plan. The colonists would remain slaves, working until they died in the alien mines. It seemed hopeless. Then Ji-woo noticed something in the file. She looked closer at the list of captured colonists from Kepler 442b. One name stood out, Dr. Kang Yuna, xenobiologist. She looked up at Tae-yang. Is this his sister? She asked. Tae-yang's eyes widened. He had not noticed. He grabbed the file and read the name again. His face turned pale. We need to tell him now. They flew to the mountains in a military transport. Dae-hyun's home was a small cabin surrounded by trees. Smoke rose from the chimney. When they knocked on the door, nobody answered. They knocked again. The door opened. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall with tired eyes and a face marked by old scars. His hair was longer than military regulations allowed. He looked at Tae-yang with no emotion. I told your messenger. I'm done. Leave me alone. Your sister was on Kepler 442b, Tae-yang said quietly. The Vecthari took her. Dae-hyun froze. His face changed. The tiredness vanished, replaced by something cold and dangerous. Yuna, they took Yuna. She's being taken to Corvin 9, a prison world. We don't have much time. Dae-hyun turned and walked back into his cabin. For a moment, they thought he was going to close the door. Instead, he returned wearing his old combat gear. The black armor still fit perfectly. He carried a bag of weapons and equipment. I have conditions, he said. I work alone. No team, no backup, no oversight. You give me a ship and stay out of my way. When I find Yuna and the others, I'll bring them home. But I do this my way. Ambassador Ji-woo stepped forward. Captain, we can provide support. Soldiers, resources, no. His voice was firm. Every person you send is someone I have to protect. I work better alone. Either you trust me or you don't. Choose now. Taeyang looked at Jiwoo. She nodded slowly. They had no other options. Fine, we have a stealth ship ready. The Silent Echo. It has experimental cloaking technology and enough supplies for 3 months. Good. I leave in 1 hour. Daehyun walked past them toward the transport. At the military base, technicians rushed to prepare the Silent Echo. The ship was small but advanced, designed for missions behind enemy lines. Daehyun checked every system personally. He loaded his weapons and studied maps of Vekthari space. Before boarding, Taeyang approached him one last time. Daehyun, I know what happened on your last mission still haunts you. But this is different. You're not just fighting for Earth, you're fighting for your sister. Daehyun looked at him with cold eyes. I'm not fighting for Earth. I'm fighting because they took what's mine. The Vekthari made a mistake. They think humans are weak. They think we'll negotiate and beg. They're wrong. I'm going to show them what happens when you take our people. He climbed into the cockpit. The engines powered up with a low hum. The Silent Echo lifted off the ground and shot into the sky. Within minutes, it disappeared into the darkness of space. Taeyang stood on the landing pad watching the stars. Jiwoo joined him. Do you think he can do it? She asked. One man against an entire empire? Taeyang smiled grimly. The Vekthari fear him for a reason. They call him the Shadow of Death. They should have remembered that shadows only exist where there's light, and Daehyun is about to bring them darkness. Far away in Vekthari space, Overlord Thexanar received reports about increased human communications. His intelligence officers told him Earth was planning something. He laughed. Humans were predictable. They would try diplomacy first, then maybe a small military action. Either way, the Vekthari were ready. What Thexanar didn't know was that Earth had already sent their response. It wasn't an army or a fleet. It was one man. And that one man was the worst nightmare the Vekthari Empire had ever faced. Daehyun set the navigation system for Corvin 9. The journey would take 3 weeks. He had plenty of time to plan. He pulled up intelligence reports about the prison world. It was heavily guarded with thousands of soldiers and advanced defense systems. Most people would call the mission impossible. But Daehyun had learned long ago that impossible just meant nobody had tried hard enough. He would find Yuna, he would free the prisoners, and he would make the Vekthari regret they ever heard the name humanity. The Silent Echo slipped through space like a ghost. Behind it, Earth held its breath and hoped. Ahead, an empire waited, unaware that its doom was coming. 6 months had passed since New Jeju. The galaxy watched in shock as humanity transformed. Every human world became a factory. Every ship became a weapon. Every person had a single purpose now. War. Dr. Soo-yeon stood in her laboratory on Earth. She was 52 years old. Before the massacre, she had been a peaceful researcher studying clean energy. She had won awards for her work. She had saved lives with her discoveries. Now she designed weapons that could kill millions. She looked at the blueprints on her screen. They showed a new type of missile. It carried antimatter warheads. One missile could destroy an entire city. She had designed it to kill Varkesh. Her hands shook as she approved the final design. She sent it to production. Soo-yeon had survived the New Jeju attack. She had been visiting the colony when the Varkesh came. She hid in a basement for 3 days while the world burned above her. She watched people die. She heard children screaming. When rescue came, she was different. The kind scientist was gone. In her place was someone who understood that sometimes you must become a monster to fight monsters. Earth's orbital shipyards filled the sky. They had been expanded until they were visible from the planet's surface. Thousands of ships were being built at the same time, not cargo ships or colony vessels. Warships, big ones. The largest warships humanity had ever made. Captain Minji commanded the first of these new ships. It was called the Retribution. The name was fitting. The ship was 3 kilometers long. It carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. It had been built in 4 months. Before the war, such a ship would have taken years. Minji was 41 years old. She had been a peacekeeper before the war. Her job was to help settle disputes between colonies. She had never fired a weapon in anger. That changed when she saw what happened to New Jeju. Now she trained her crew for one purpose: to hunt and kill Varkesh. The Retribution left Earth with a fleet of 50 other warships. Their destination was the border between human and Varkesh space. Admiral Daeho had given Minji clear orders. Find the enemy. Destroy them completely. Take no prisoners. Show no mercy. 3 weeks into their journey, they found their first target, a Varkesh patrol fleet, 20 ships. They were big ships built for honor combat. The Varkesh believed war was about bravery and individual skill. Ship against ship, warrior against warrior. They had rules and traditions going back thousands of years. Minji had no interest in honor combat. She launched everything at once. Missiles by the thousands, drone fighters by the hundreds, energy weapons that could cut through steel like paper. The Varkesh ships tried to respond with their traditional tactics. They failed. The human weapons did not fight with honor. They just killed. Efficiently, quickly, totally. The Varkesh ships tried to retreat. The humans hunted them down. They tried to surrender. The humans kept firing. They tried to send distress signals. No one came to help them. The battle lasted 14 minutes. All 20 Varkesh ships were destroyed. Every Varkesh warrior died. The human fleet had no casualties. Not a single ship damaged. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Commander Vexus watched from a distance. He commanded another Varkesh fleet. He had been coming to reinforce the patrol when the humans arrived. He saw the entire battle. He saw how the humans fought. It terrified him. The Varkesh were warriors. They had conquered 100 worlds. They knew war. But this was not war as they understood it. The humans did not care about honor or glory. They did not challenge opponents to fair combat. They just killed with cold efficiency. Vexus ordered his fleet to retreat. He needed to warn his superiors. The humans were not the weak traitors the Varkesh thought they were. They were something much worse. They were exterminators. Back on Earth, Admiral Deho received the battle reports. He showed no emotion. The destruction of 20 enemy ships meant nothing. The Varkesh Empire had thousands of ships. This was just the beginning. He called a meeting of all human military commanders. Generals, admirals, and special forces leaders filled the room. Deho stood before them and explained the new doctrine. The rules that would guide their war. Rule 1. Every Varkesh is an enemy. No exceptions. Rule 2. No prisoners will be taken. Ever. Rule 3. Surrendering enemies will be executed. Rule 4. Varkesh colonies will be destroyed, not occupied. Rule 5. Any species that helps the Varkesh will be considered enemies. Some commanders looked uncomfortable. A few asked questions. Was this not too extreme? Would this not make humanity look like the bad ones? Would the galaxy not condemn them? Deho's response was cold and simple. The Varkesh killed 2.4 million innocent people. They murdered children. They destroyed an entire colony just to prove they were strong. Anyone who thought humanity's response was too extreme should remember New Jeju. Remember the bodies. Remember the burning cities. Remember the children who died screaming for their parents. The room was silent. No one objected again. They all understood now. This was not a war to win territory. This was not a war for resources. This was a war to erase the Varkesh from existence. It was genocide. And humanity had decided it was justice. Lieutenant Ji-hoon led a company of Marines. He was 29 years old. Before the war, he had been training for rescue operations. His job was to save people during disasters. Now he trained his men to clear enemy stations and kill everything inside. His first mission came 2 months after the war started, a Varkesh military station near the border. It housed 45,000 warriors and their families. The station had shields and weapons. It was well defended. The Varkesh thought they were safe there. Minji's fleet arrived and destroyed the shields with focused fire. Then Ji-hoon and his Marines boarded the station. They went in with armor, weapons, and cold determination. The Varkesh defenders tried to fight back. They failed. The humans moved through the station like a machine. They used tactics the Varkesh had never seen. Grenades around corners, flamethrowers in tight spaces, suppressing fire that pinned enemies down while others advanced. The Varkesh were brave. They were skilled fighters, but they had never faced combat like this. Ji-hoon felt nothing as he cleared room after room. His training took over. Target acquired. Target eliminated. Move to next room. Repeat. He did not think about the fact that he was killing living beings. He thought about New Jeju, about the children who died there. That made it easier. The station fell in 6 hours. Every Varkesh inside was dead. 45,000 of them. The Marines had lost 37 soldiers. Ji-hoon stood in the command center surrounded by bodies. He felt tired, not sad, not guilty, Just tired. One of his soldiers asked if they should take prisoners next time, maybe get intelligence from captured enemies. Ji-hoon shook his head. Their orders were clear. No prisoners. The Varkesh had shown no mercy to the people of New Jeju. They would receive no mercy in return. After the Marines evacuated, the fleet destroyed what remained of the station. Nothing was left. No evidence. No survivors. Just debris floating in space. News of these attacks spread through the galaxy. Other species watched with growing horror. The Galactic Coalition held emergency meetings. They debated what to do about humanity. Some species wanted to intervene and stop the war. Others were afraid. If the humans could do this to the Varkesh, what might they do to anyone who got in their way? Ambassador Thalanis tried again to negotiate. He went to Earth and begged for mercy. He said the Varkesh were losing. He said they were ready to talk about peace. He said continued killing would not bring back the dead of New Jeju. Earth's government refused to meet with him. They sent a message instead. The Varkesh started this war. They chose to murder innocents. Now they would face the consequences. Humanity would not stop until every Varkesh was dead or until they surrendered unconditionally. Warlord Kraxith, the Varkesh leader who had ordered the attack on New Jeju, laughed when he heard about the human demands. He thought the humans were bluffing. His empire had 15 billion citizens. They had thousands of warships. They controlled 100 worlds. How could one species destroy all of that? He would find out. The human fleets were growing larger every day. New weapons were being invented every week. And behind it all was Admiral Daeho, the man who had lost his daughter. The man who had decided that the Varkesh would pay for their crime with extinction. The war was just beginning. The Varkesh still thought they could win. They still believed in their strength and their warrior traditions. They did not yet understand what they were fighting. They were not fighting soldiers. They were fighting an entire species that had decided to become death itself. 18 months had passed since the war began. The Varkesh Empire was collapsing. They had lost 300 ships. They had lost 20 stations. They had lost 5 colony worlds. And worst of all, they had lost their confidence. Commander Vexus sat in his command chair. His fleet was hiding in a nebula. They had been running for 2 weeks. The humans always found them. It did not matter where they hid. Deep space, asteroid fields, dead systems. The humans had machines that could track them anywhere. He looked at his crew. They were afraid. These were Varkesh warriors. They had trained their entire lives for combat. They believed death in battle was honorable. But there was no honor in this war. There was only running and dying. The humans did not fight like warriors. They fought like hunters, patient, efficient, merciless. They would chase a single ship for weeks just to destroy it. They never gave up. They never got tired. They were like a force of nature that could not be stopped. Vexus had tried everything. He had ambushed human patrols. He had laid traps. He had used every tactical trick he knew. Nothing worked. The humans adapted quickly. They learned from every encounter. And they had resources that seemed endless. The alarm sounded. Human ships were entering the nebula. Vexus ordered his fleet to run again. But this time there was nowhere to go. Human ships appeared from every direction. They had been surrounded. Captain Minji commanded the human force. Her fleet had been hunting Vexus for 3 months. She had learned his patterns. She knew how he thought. This nebula was his last refuge. She had guessed he would come here and laid her trap accordingly. Vexus tried to negotiate. He broadcast on all frequencies. He said his fleet would surrender. They would give up their weapons. They would accept any terms. Just let them live. Minji received the message. She felt nothing. The Varkesh had not let the children of New Jeju surrender. They had not accepted any terms. They had just killed everyone. Now they wanted mercy. They would not get it. She gave the order to fire. Her fleet opened up with everything. Missiles filled the space between the fleets. Energy weapons cut through Varkesh shields. The Varkesh tried to fight back, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. One by one, their ships died. Vexus watched his fleet die around him. He thought about his life. He had been a proud warrior. He had believed in the strength of his empire. He had thought the Varkesh were the greatest species in the galaxy. Now he knew the truth. They had awakened something that could not be defeated. His ship was hit. Shields failed. Hull breached. He died knowing his entire civilization would follow him into darkness. While the space battles continued, Dr. Soo-hyun completed her greatest and most terrible creation. She called it a stellar compression device. It was a weapon that could force a star to expand prematurely. When activated near a star, it would cause the star to swell and burn everything in the system. Admiral Daeho approved its use. 3 Varkesh home systems were targeted. These were old colonies with billions of inhabitants. They had cities thousands of years old. They had art and culture and history. None of that mattered anymore. The human fleet arrived at the first system. They deployed the device near the star. Then they left. 6 hours later, the star began to change. It grew larger, hotter. Radiation increased. The Varkesh in the system tried to evacuate, but there was not enough time. Planets burned. Billions died. The system became uninhabitable. The same thing happened to the other 2 targeted systems. 9 billion Varkesh dead in 3 days. Not from battle. Not from invasion. Just erased from existence. The Galactic Coalition condemned this action. They called it a war crime. They said humanity had gone too far. Some species threatened to intervene militarily to stop the humans. Earth's response was broadcast to every species in the galaxy. Admiral Daeho himself delivered the message. He appeared on screens across known space. His face was cold. His voice was hard. He said that anyone who interfered would be considered an enemy. Anyone who helped the Varkesh would share their fate. He reminded the galaxy what the Varkesh had done. They had murdered millions of innocents. They had targeted civilians deliberately. They had killed children just to prove they were strong. This was not a war crime. This was justice. And humanity would not stop until justice was complete. No species intervened. The threats were empty. Everyone was afraid. They had seen what humanity could do when pushed. They did not want to become the next target. Hyunwoo had spent the last year working with the military. He told the stories of New Jeju to soldiers and civilians. He kept the memory of the massacre alive. He made sure no one forgot why this war was being fought. But lately he had started to wonder. He saw the casualty reports. He knew how many Varkesh had died. The numbers were staggering. Far more than had died on New Jeju. He started to ask himself if this was still justice or if it had become something else. He met with Lieutenant Ji-hoon one day. Ji-hoon had just returned from another mission. Another station cleared. Another few thousand enemies killed. Hyunwoo asked him how he felt about what they were doing. Ji-hoon was quiet for a long time. Then he said he did not feel anything anymore. He had killed so many that it became routine. He did his job. He followed orders. He tried not to think about the fact that he was participating in genocide. Some of his soldiers were having problems. Nightmares, anxiety, guilt. They knew what they were doing was necessary. They knew the Varkesh deserved punishment, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were different things. Ji-hoon said the hardest part was seeing Varkesh who looked afraid, who tried to surrender, who begged for their lives. In those moments, they did not look like the monsters who destroyed New Jeju. They looked like people who wanted to live. But orders were orders. No prisoners. No mercy. Hyunwoo understood. He felt the same conflict. He had lost everything on New Jeju. His father, his home, his entire life. He wanted the Varkesh to pay, but he also wondered if they were becoming the same as their enemies. If they were losing their humanity in the process of seeking revenge. He shared these thoughts with his mother. She was still struggling with grief. She had not spoken much since they left New Jeju. But when Hyunwoo told her about his doubts, she finally spoke. She said that what happened to them was evil, pure evil. The Varkesh had no reason to attack New Jeju except cruelty. They wanted to show their strength by murdering the weak. That kind of evil had to be answered, had to be punished, otherwise it would happen again. But she also said that revenge had a cost. They were paying that cost now. Every human involved in this war was being changed by it. They were becoming harder, colder, more willing to do terrible things. That was the price of justice. Meanwhile, Warlord Kraxith was finally beginning to understand his mistake. His empire was falling apart. His people were fleeing to neutral space. His military was being destroyed piece by piece. And the humans were not slowing down. They were accelerating. He tried to negotiate through intermediaries. He offered reparations. He offered territory. He offered to surrender himself if they would spare his people. The humans refused everything except unconditional surrender, complete disarmament, permanent occupation, and even then Deho made no promises about mercy. Kraxith refused. He still had pride. He still believed the Varkesh could turn this around. He ordered his remaining forces to make a final stand at the Varkesh homeworld. If they were going to die, they would die with honor. He did not understand that the humans did not care about honor. They cared about results. And the result they wanted was the complete elimination of the Varkesh threat. Nothing less would be acceptable. The human fleets gathered. Hundreds of ships, thousands of weapons, millions of soldiers. They prepared for the final assault. The attack on the Varkesh homeworld. The end of the war. The completion of their revenge. Admiral Deho looked at the strategic map. The Varkesh homeworld glowed red on his screen. Soon it would be under attack. Soon the Varkesh would face the same terror they had inflicted on New Jeju. Soon his daughter would be avenged. He felt nothing. No satisfaction, no joy, just emptiness. Revenge was supposed to make the pain go away, but he suspected that when this was over, the pain would still be there. The only difference would be that billions of others would be suffering too. 2 years and 3 months after New Jeju, the human fleet arrived at Kraxor Prime. It was the Varkesh homeworld. 3 billion people lived there. It was the heart of their empire. Their oldest cities were there. Their greatest monuments. Their entire history. The human fleet was massive. 300 warships surrounded the planet. They had enough firepower to crack the world apart. Admiral Deho stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the planet below. Somewhere down there was Warlord Kraxith. The one who ordered the attack on New Jeju. Deho opened a channel to the planet. His message was broadcast to every Varkesh on the world. His words were simple and clear. Surrender Kraxith within 48 hours or everyone dies. Every single one. No exceptions. On the surface, panic spread. The Varkesh had never faced an ultimatum like this. Their entire species was being threatened with extinction. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to surrender. The debate raged in government halls and on the streets. Warlord Kraxith addressed his people. He said they should fight, die with honor rather than submit to human demands. He said the Varkesh were warriors. They did not bow to threats. They did not give up their leaders to save themselves. But many Varkesh disagreed. They had families, children. They did not want to die for Kraxith's pride. The warlord had started this war. He had ordered the attack on New Jeju. Why should everyone else pay for his mistake? A group of military officers, led by a commander named Rexith, made a decision. They would not let their entire species die because of one leader's pride. They gathered loyal soldiers and marched on Kraxith's palace. A brief civil war erupted on Kraxor Prime. Varkesh fought against Varkesh. Those who wanted to surrender against those who wanted to fight to the end. The streets ran with blood. Buildings burned. It was chaos. Rexith's forces won. They captured Kraxith and put him in chains. The warlord who had been so proud was now a prisoner of his own people. Rexith sent a message to the humans. They had Kraxith. They would hand him over. Please spare them, Deho agreed. A shuttle brought Kraxith up from the planet. The warlord was brought to Deho's flagship in chains. He was forced to walk through corridors lined with human soldiers. They all stared at him with cold hatred. Finally, Kraxith stood before Admiral Deho. The two leaders faced each other. One had ordered the deaths of millions. The other had answered with the deaths of billions. They were both destroyers now. Kraxith tried to stand proud. He said he had only wanted to show the strength of his people. He had not expected the humans to respond like this. He thought they were weak. He was wrong. Deho looked at the warlord who had killed his daughter. He felt a hatred so deep it was like ice in his chest, but he also felt tired. So very tired. This war had consumed 2 years of his life. It had changed him into someone he barely recognized. He asked Kraxith one question. Why attack New Jeju? Why murder all those people? What did the warlord gain from it? Kraxith had no good answer. He said it was to prove Varkesh power, to show that they were the dominant species, to make humans fear them. It all sounded empty now, pointless. The attack had accomplished nothing except unleashing destruction on his own people. Deho told him that New Jeju was a farming colony. Peaceful people, children, families. None of them were soldiers. None of them threatened anyone. Kraxith had murdered them for pride, for ego, for no real reason at all. Now billions of Varkesh were dead. Their empire was destroyed. Their civilization was in ruins, all because Kraxith wanted to prove he was strong. That was his legacy. Not strength, just death and suffering. Kraxith finally understood the magnitude of his error. He had started something that could not be stopped. He had awakened a species that fought wars of total extermination. He had doomed his own people. His final words were strange. He said that Deho had become what he hated, that the humans had turned into monsters just like him, that there was no difference between them now. Deho considered this. Perhaps it was true. Perhaps they had become monsters. But there was one difference. The humans had not started this. They had not attacked innocents without cause. They had responded to evil with overwhelming force. That made it justice, not murder, or at least that was what he told himself. Deep down, he was not sure anymore. Kraxith was executed the next day. His death was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species watched as the warlord who started the war paid for his crimes. Some felt justice was served. Others felt only sadness at the waste of it all. The Varkesh Empire officially surrendered. They agreed to all human demands. Complete disarmament. Permanent military occupation. War reparations. Their surviving population would live under human oversight for the foreseeable future. Of the 15 billion Varkesh who lived before the war, only 450 million remained. The rest were dead. Killed in battle. Destroyed when their worlds burned. The Varkesh were no longer a threat. They were barely a species anymore. Captain Minji stood down her fleet. Her ship had been in constant combat for 2 years. She had killed thousands of enemies personally. Her crew had killed hundreds of thousands more. Now it was over. She walked through her ship and saw her crew. They looked exhausted. Many had that empty look in their eyes. The look of people who had seen too much. Done too much. They had survived the war but lost pieces of themselves in the process. Dr. Soo-hyun deactivated the last of her weapons. The stellar compression devices. The antimatter bombs. The planet crackers. All the terrible things she had created. She put them in secure storage. Locked them away. Hoped they would never be needed again. But she kept the blueprints. Just in case. That was the dark truth she had learned. Once you create such weapons, they never really go away. The knowledge exists. It can always be used again if needed. Lieutenant Ji-hoon returned to Earth with his Marines. They were given a hero's welcome, parades, medals, speeches about their bravery and sacrifice. But Ji-hoon felt like a fraud. Heroes saved people. He had killed people. Thousands of them. Many of his soldiers struggled with what they had done. Some had nightmares. Some could not be around their families. Some just stared at walls and said nothing. They had done their duty. They had followed orders. But the cost was high. The Galactic Coalition held a ceremony. They officially recognized the end of the war. Human and Varkesh representatives signed a peace treaty. Everyone made speeches about healing and moving forward. But the words felt hollow. The galaxy had learned something terrifying. Humanity was capable of genocide. When pushed far enough, they would destroy entire civilizations. This made them both respected and feared. No one wanted to be the next species that humanity decided to exterminate. Hyunwoo watched all of this from Earth. He thought about New Jeju, about his father who died there, about the 2 million people who were murdered. Justice had been served. The Varkesh had paid for their crime many times over, but he did not feel satisfied. He did not feel happy. He just felt empty. Revenge had not brought his father back. It had not restored New Jeju. It had only added more death to the pile. More suffering. More pain. His mother told him that this was the nature of war. There are no winners, only survivors. They had survived. The Varkesh had not. That was all. Admiral Deho retired from military service. He had accomplished his mission. The Varkesh were destroyed. His daughter was avenged. But he felt no peace. He had become a man who ordered the deaths of billions. That was not something you could retire from. It was something you carried forever. He visited a memorial built for the victims of New Jeju. His daughter's name was there among millions of others. He stood in front of it for a long time. He wondered if she would be proud of what he did. Or if she would be horrified. He would never know. She was gone, and nothing he did could change that. The war was over. Justice was served. But the cost was so high. So very high. He wondered if it had been worth it. He suspected he would spend the rest of his life wondering that same question. 5 years after the war ended, the galaxy was a different place. Humanity had become the dominant military power. Other species looked to them for protection, or feared them, often both at the same time. Earth had demobilized most of its military. The massive warships were placed in storage. The weapons factories returned to making civilian goods. Soldiers came home to their families. Life slowly returned to something like normal, but normal was different now. Everyone had been changed by the war. The people who fought carried scars both visible and invisible. The people who stayed home carried guilt for what had been done in their name. No one escaped unchanged. Lieutenant Ji-hoon opened a counseling center for veterans. Many soldiers were struggling with what they had experienced. The nightmares, the guilt, the memories of things they had done. Ji-hoon understood because he felt it too. He met with dozens of veterans every week. Marines who had cleared stations. Pilots who had bombed planets. Ship crews who had fired the weapons. All of them struggling with the same questions. Had it been necessary? Had they gone too far? Were they still good people? Ji-hoon had no easy answers. He told them that what they did was terrible. But it had been in response to something equally terrible. The Varkesh had committed genocide first. Humanity had responded with overwhelming force. Perhaps too overwhelming. History would judge. But they had done what they thought was right at the time. That was cold comfort. But it was all he could offer. Hyunwoo had become an advocate for peace. He traveled to different worlds and spoke about his experiences. He told the story of New Jeju, about the peaceful colony that was destroyed, about the senseless violence, about the cost of war. But he also spoke about what came after, about how humanity's response had been even more destructive, about how revenge had solved nothing, about how the cycle of violence only created more pain. He urged other species to find better ways to resolve conflicts. Some humans criticized him. They said he was dishonoring the dead of New Jeju, that he was making humanity look weak, that the Varkesh got what they deserved. But Hyunwoo kept speaking. He felt he owed it to his father. To everyone who died, a memorial was built on the ruins of New Jeju Colony. It covered 100 acres. 2.39 million names were carved into black stone. Every person who died in the massacre. The memorial was a reminder of what was lost, of what was avenged, of what should never happen again. Hyunwoo visited often. He would stand before his father's name and remember the life they had, the dreams they shared, the future that was stolen. He would think about everything that happened after. The war, the deaths, the destruction. And he would wonder if his father would have wanted this. He suspected his father would have wanted peace. But peace had not been possible after New Jeju. The Varkesh had made sure of that. The Galactic Coalition restructured itself. Humanity was given a permanent seat on the Security Council. They were recognized as the primary military guarantor of galactic peace. This gave them enormous influence and enormous responsibility. Ambassador Thalanis worked with human diplomats to create new laws. Any species that committed genocide would face immediate intervention. Not by the coalition as a whole, but by humanity specifically. This was meant to prevent another New Jeju, but it also meant humanity was now the galaxy's enforcer. Some species were grateful. They felt safer knowing humanity would protect them. Others resented it. They felt like they were living under human domination. The threat of human military action hung over every dispute, every conflict, every negotiation. Captain Minji took command of the new peacekeeping fleet. It was much smaller than the war fleet had been, but it was still powerful. She led patrols across the galaxy, responding to conflicts, protecting the weak, deterring the aggressive. She was good at this new role. She had learned patience during the war. She had learned when to show strength and when to show restraint. She became known as firm but fair, willing to fight if necessary, but always preferring peace. Sometimes at night she still dreamed about the war. About the ships she destroyed, about the enemies she killed, about the orders she followed without question. She wondered if she was a hero or a war criminal. Probably both. History was complicated like that. The surviving Varkesh lived under human military occupation. Their worlds were governed by human administrators. Their military was disbanded forever. They were allowed to rebuild their civilization, but under strict oversight. Many Varkesh were bitter. Others were grateful to be alive at all. Commander Rexith, who had captured Kraxith and ended the war, became the leader of the Varkesh survivors. He worked with human occupiers to rebuild his species. It was difficult. The Varkesh had been proud warriors. Now they were a defeated people living on charity. But slowly, things improved. New cities were built. Children were born. Life continued. The Varkesh would never be what they were, but perhaps they could become something better. Something less violent, something that learned from their mistakes. Dr. Suyun never designed another weapon. She returned to energy research. She worked on peaceful projects. Fusion reactors, solar collectors, things that helped people instead of killing them. But she kept all her weapon designs locked in a secure database, just in case. That burden would never leave her. She taught at a university now. She told her students about the war, about what she did, about why she did it, but also about the cost, about the guilt, about how easy it is to justify terrible things when you are angry and hurt. She wanted the next generation to be better, to find better solutions, to never have to make the choices she made. Admiral Deho lived quietly in retirement. He had a small house near the ocean. He spent his days reading and walking on the beach. He tried not to think about the war, but it was always there, in his dreams, in his thoughts. In every quiet moment, he visited his daughter's memorial once a year. On the anniversary of New Jeju, he would stand there for hours, remembering her, remembering everyone who died, thinking about everything that followed. People still debated whether what humanity did was right. Some said it was justified. The Varkesh committed genocide first. Humanity just responded in kind. Others said two wrongs did not make a right. That humanity should have been better. That they became the very thing they claimed to oppose. Deho thought about this constantly. He had ordered the deaths of billions. He had systematically destroyed an entire civilization. He had done it for his daughter, for New Jeju, for justice. But was it justice? Or was it just revenge on a massive scale? He would never know for sure. And that uncertainty haunted him more than anything else. The galaxy moved on. New conflicts arose. New problems emerged. But everyone remembered the Varkesh War. It became a lesson, a warning, a reminder of what happens when violence goes too far. Some species feared humanity. They saw what humans were capable of when pushed. They made sure never to push. Other species admired humanity. They saw a species that would defend the innocent at any cost, that would punish evil without mercy. The truth was somewhere in between. Humanity was capable of great good and great evil, like most species, but they had proven they could be pushed to extremes. That made them dangerous. That made them necessary. That made them both protector and threat. New Jeju was never rebuilt. The ruined world remained empty, a memorial to what was lost. Some suggested terraforming it and starting over, but most humans felt it should remain as it was. A scar on the galaxy, a reminder that some wounds never fully heal. Yunwoo had children of his own now. He told them about their grandfather, about the peaceful life they had before the attack, about the terrible things that happened after. He wanted them to understand that violence only creates more violence, that revenge solves nothing, that the cycle must be broken somewhere. His children asked if he forgave the Varkesh. He said he did not know. Forgiveness was complicated when millions had died. But he did not hate them anymore. He just felt sad, sad for everyone involved, for the people who died, for the people who survived, for the people who had to live with what they did. The war had ended 5 years ago, but in many ways it was still happening. In the nightmares of veterans, in the grief of survivors, in the debates about morality and justice, in the fear other species felt when they looked at humanity. The Varkesh had slaughtered the innocent. Humanity had answered with extermination. Both were true. Both were terrible. And now everyone had to live with the consequences. Perhaps that was the real lesson. There are no clean victories. No simple answers. Only choices and their consequences. The galaxy had learned that humanity was capable of genocide. And humanity had learned that being capable of something and being proud of it were very different things. Peace had been achieved. Justice had been served. But the cost was high, so very high, and everyone who survived carried that cost with them. Every day, every night, for the rest of their lives. That was the price of revenge. That was the price of justice. That was the price of crossing a line that should never be crossed. The Varkish paid with their civilization. Humanity paid with their innocence. And the galaxy paid with the knowledge that sometimes the monsters we create to fight evil are just as terrifying as the evil itself.